Morihei Ueshiba.
Morihei.
Oh, good. We just a bit of Great. We're just going straight into a lengthen, so just with a breath in, nice and deep, and then folding forwards. Take your time with it. Like that. Great. I'll just go one more time. Chin up. Just pulling all the way back up. I just need a little bit of rotation. On there. And just bring the elbows up. And just then we're releasing up through the back. Just reaching out and over both hands. Great. And we've got a little bit up and down with it. We'll just keep them neutral with it. Swap them over. Reach up and down. A little bit of flexion back at the forearm as well. Just to activate the forearms. Just to explore a little bit like a kind of turn as well. So you do this like front and back with the fingers. Or you could also add a little bit of rotation towards the body. Or also away. Just explore a little bit with the shoulder. So that you make the rotation from the shoulder. Make it from the side of the joint, not just the hand. And then that just starts to bring the rotation back in. So you could do the outside arm rotation, or you could do it that way. You can kind of choose a hand position and just slowly take it into it. Feel that the legs are also involved now, so as you go into the rotation, keep spine relatively vertical, the body vertical. And if you feel comfortable, you could start to take it a bit deeper. That's so nice. Good. Nice. And then just start to play with it, kind of a reach out and go a bit more left and right. Great. Good. And we just play with the side reach over. And so playing with the legs. Play with either grounding with the back, what would be the back leg of the movement, or also play with letting the body shift to the outside leg as well and letting the body go through. So just explore a little bit. Different lines through from the ground to the top hand. Really two choices in a sense, but a few choices, but the main two would be grounding the body through the inside of the outside leg. And then depending on which leg, you could also, one interesting one with this one, if I'm grounding to the outside leg, will be allowing the hips also kind of pull very gently that way as well, and then just opening up the inside of the body that way. And obviously the other side would be really allowing the body to reach over its way. Just think about, and also if you think about with those, the two kind of lateral lines of the body, think about the other side of the body that's also opening in that movement. The tendency obviously with this one is like the contraction in that side, pulling open this way, but I'm thinking about lengthening and opening. Let's also think about lengthening the inside of the body in that line. Great, perfect. Great, and then just go rolling the hips out. So just first we just kind of fix a point with the head, let the hips roll around. And just mix in the directions with this one and really feel, and you're kind of gliding through the hips. Particularly with this one, feel the change over of the hip. That part to that part. You've got two trying to change over. There's one at the front and one at the back. You just feel the hips can glide smoothly, that motion. And then next through with it, just allow a little bit more oscillation, so you can also let the head go with it. And then you're basically just also mobilizing the shoulders with the hips, and the head can go with it really as well. So the other one you could do with the eyes is a useful one, which is like look around the space with the eyes as you're doing the rotation. And just get a little bit more mobility to the head and the neck. And the eyes in place as well. Lovely. Great. And then we just go into the knees, so just rolling them together. Yeah, just mixing the directions a little bit. If it feels comfortable, just play with a little bit of a heel raise. Maybe go down a little bit deeper into it. Take your time, obviously, with it. And just be careful, in particular with this one, about going out of the outside the joint or against the joint. So actually, although this is not really a knee exercise, it's more an ankle and hip exercise. That's where you're actually really mobilizing, and the knees basically just hinging, obviously. So You play with the ankle and the ability to mobilize. It's important for this one, very important for this one. Great. Perfect. Good. And then just apply a little bit of weight back, just pull the toes up towards the face, so that's just to activate the chin muscles a little bit more. And then just coming down, just take it down as far as comfortable, spread the knees away. And coming back. And just pull the toes up a little bit towards the face. And then spreading down. And we're just kind of line those two, just opening out the knees. And just be careful. You might want to also go a little bit wider with this one. You want feels a bit more comfortable. Open up the hips a little bit more. And then just mixing the directions a little bit, working both ways. And then really a hip exercise and an ankle exercise. Just allowing the knees to hinge and release. And with the hands also checking in the knees, whether they're still soft. The main one to be to look for is like a lot of tension in the front of the knee as you're doing it. That would be like knees basically locking up. So just feel that the knee can be still relatively free. And it might be just going a little bit shallower with the movement. Great. Good. And we're just going to the ankle. So just if you put one foot forward, I put the other leg back. And we just start to roll out the foot again, just mixing the directions. So just explore around the ankle. One thing will be play with the distance of the heel to the ground. So you can play with also kind of step up and down as you're doing it. And if you think about lengthening the calves and the Achilles and all that kind of area, and also the under edge of the foot, the sole of the foot. The other side. Right. Great. And we just go into a lengthen some back. Think about being on a train track with this on, and just pulsing the heel back. So key thing would be the back toes just kind of aligning forward. So obviously lengthening. In this case, also play with a little bit of maybe a bit of a lean forward into it as you go, but play with taking that lengthening down the heel and see if you can also channel it up into more into the hip flexor here. Just play with that, and then the next one from that, just bring back the whole body. Just think about a reach up with it, and you can think about a heel pulse down and also gentle kind of reach up with it. And then when you just to work the hand a little bit more, just play with a little bit of a flex back at the hand. So just to activate again the wrist, the forearm, and the hand. Just play with a like this would be like a. You could also think of this more going towards like a heel, a strike out. There's a great statue in Norwich. It comes from the local council building, I think, which is this big cat kind of reaching out with the hands. A really cool statue. But just think about creating a line really from that back leg to the front hand. And then just play a little bit with the direction of the fingers as well. And then also play with that and the foot. So then the foot can kind of turn out. You could create a connection between the foot and the hand. And the fingers go out. But the fingers go out to the right side. The foot could also turn out to the right side where you do the counter. Right. Okay, now just play with that line and opening out again. We're mostly working shoulder and ankle mobility. And then transferring it up into the hand, obviously. So here we go. Great. Right. Good. And then we just go back to the leg. So again, you just think about being on a railway track. Fine. And then just the pulse down with the foot. Okay, step back, creating length. And then next one, just apply a little bit more of a lean into it, and you could either come up neutral and then go into it or stay in that position. And just feel that you're starting to lengthen up a little bit more deeper body, and then just start to play again with the hand reaching up, and then think about taking that whole line up to the sky, and again just bringing in the flexion at the wrist. Just feel the forearm a little bit more active. Feel those two ends of the chain. This is wrist and forearm and ankle, shins. Probably take a little bit more of the movement. And then again, we just play with play with the direction of the feet, the toes, and the hands as well. So go back with the hand. And you might just notice it starts to load into different parts of the body. You might notice you start to twist into it. It might start to get a bit more load on the leg that's grounding the body. Front leg. Great. Perfect. And then last one, it's just coming back to that one we did before in terms of a splitting. Think about just doing it a little bit more active now with the legs. So if you think about this whole movement, basically kind of spiraling up and out from the body. So think about basically doing this core out, basically. So feet and hands as the periphery of the body, and think about just pulsing it out. And again, play with things like a heel tap down, and play with, again, more of a kind of pulse out from the hand. So the breath will play a big part in this, obviously, but just think about the breath in this case just being basically appropriate with the movement. So if it's like a long, slow pulse movement, it might just be a long, slow breath out. It's a bit of a faster pulse out. Might be a bit more of a sharper breath out. And in this case, just play a little bit. The really nice one for the kind of spiral line work will be like left foot forward and right hand reaching out. But you could also play with the other way. But the one that's really going to work if you're looking at kind of spiral line work or just opening the body up, then it would be like working contralaterally, like that. And then just again playing with it. Play also in this case with the weight in the legs. So you could do this 50-50 and still have the back leg off the ground and kind of feel that the body's weighted evenly. Or you could play with a bit more like 60-40. And you could do that also front and back. You probably feel it's a bit easier to load more weight to the front leg. And then in terms of feedback for this, is just how that back leg would feel if I'm loading a little bit more weight to the front leg, front side. How mobile does the back leg feel, and how stable do I feel in the front leg? So great. And then this will just change freely with it, so do the same thing right and left. And just notice any differences. So you might feel the right side a bit tighter or freer. Yeah, notice it. You're just playing with weight distribution really, and good opening those spiral lines up. Again, main joints that are working are going to be hips and shoulders. But you might notice it a little bit more in terms of feeling in the body. You might notice a bit more in the periphery, the ankles and chins and forearms and wrists. Very nice, good. It just takes a little bit of solo, single leg work. So just playing with a kind of a roll through. And with this one, you could do this as a mobility exercise, which would be like the rest of the body being very static. And then I'm just going to kind of focus on the hip movement. If that's done as a kind of, if I'm just looking to mobilize the hip. What I prefer for something like this will be like the arms will be free. And I'm just looking at not really gaining mobility, but just mobilizing the joints. So the main thing would be to feel the ankles free and the knees are free and that the hips are kind of free. This is an easy one actually to do. If I can do this. I don't know if this is safe. This one's obviously easier because you're actually elevated off the ground and you can release the hip through this way. So this one, it's a bit tricky. It's very tricky to actually release this in this way. Because if you actually do release the hip, the leg's just kind of releasing down. So there's going to be a little bit of a pull of the hip here, but just feel again that the legs as released as it can be, and the main joints in this case to release again will be like the knee and ankle. So I would just play with maybe a shake out a little bit, and then just notice what the arms kind of naturally do. You might start to get kind of marching motions. And the one that tends to come up naturally would be like a contra. Lateral would be like left arm going forwards and backwards, but you might notice different patterns with the body. Right. And then obviously the working leg is actually the one in the ground. Again, you might notice ankles, shins, all those kind of parts of the body, the periphery, a little bit working a bit more. And then just let's play with a little bit more of a circle then. So again, keeping the foot and knee as relaxed as you can. Just play with circling and again, mixing the directions. And just notice what happens with the hands. And if you were doing this as a pure mobility drill to increase mobility in the hip, again, it will be better to kind of make the body a little bit more static and then really, again, exploring the full motion of the hip. But in this case, I would just play with a whole body mobilizing exercise. So not really to increase mobility, but just to feel the body or explore the body, joint system and balance and things like that. And then the last one, just to change, like just play with a little bit more of a kick out. So again, if the joint's kind of free and loose, you'll be able to kind of a little bit extend out through the knee and extend out through the foot. But don't force it with this one. The main one would be like in different parts of the foot to kind of extend out. If you've got the toe side, ball of the foot, and the heel part of the foot, and then just play with in the ability to do that. It doesn't have to be high. And if this is applied to kicking work, obviously it's very good to be able to kick high and get the foot up, but most of the work for functional kicks are actually going to be in the knee to shin area. And when we do use kicks in Aikido, that's where they tend to be. But again, in terms of healthy body work, obviously, very good sign that I can get the leg up quite high and reach out quite easily. But again, just play with the ability of the foot to reach out, play with front and back sides. And then the stabilizing leg, the active leg, is going to be doing the majority of the work in terms of balance. Yeah, nice. Great. And then just before we go, kind of bringing the hands into it, just switch sides with it. So just switch over to that leg. And again, just because that leg's done the work, just release it out a bit more. And then I just play with swinging through again. And just to check on the ankle again, might be just wobbling, shaking, and the knee. Pick out a little bit, and then just play with a swing. And you can take this front and back, side to side. And the main thing, just feel that the leg's kind of acting like a pendulum. Again, start to notice what the hands are doing or the arms are doing in terms of the pattern. Great. Very nice, good. And then it just start to play with a little bit more of a circling pattern. And if you can think about, obviously circling the hip, I would also think about the toes and the knees. The knee circle. And there's nice things. If you want to check mobility, would be like also writing letters or numbers with the foot. So it's a nice one just to get, just to check on mobility. Things like write your name, I hope things like this is also useful. Things just to get the foot and the hip and the knee, give it a little bit more challenge. Good. Great. And then again, just go into a little bit more pointing work. So just take a part of the foot and point it out and feel the rest of the leg also drawing out the pattern as well. And again, it could be with the heel, with the ball of the foot. You could also do like inside, outside of the foot. One I would do a lot of it if I'm going to do any kind of kicking work in the dojo will be just a kind of contact drill with the foot on the person or on a pad. And most of the work's in the stabilizing the body and the leg. And then just the ability of the leg to be free and mobile. Great. Very nice. Perfect. Great. And then next part, we're just mixing the legs a little bit, just start to play again with the hands. So if you think about chaining a pattern through the hands, and then if I'm thinking about reaching with the foot, choose another hand, choose one of the hands, or one of the arms to reach also with. And again, you could do it same direction, and kind of working the something out. You could do it opposite, but just kind of play with it a little bit. I would make a kind of index finger pointer, but it would make it easier maybe, but also play with the ability of the hands also. Pass a movement through, and again, you just do very simple gestures like reaching, pointing, and then as you're doing it, just play with one leg for a while, and then when you feel it's starting to get a bit tired in terms of pattern, just change with it, and then just what I take it to is more like a kind of step drill with it, and then a point out, place the foot somewhere, and then travel into it, point out, reach out, go into a bit more of a step drill, but play within the leg as well. So you could step every time, or you could step every third one or fourth one, or however you want to play with it, basically. And just in terms of movement, just creating a chain between the foot and the hand. And think about the movement being kind of equal in terms of if there's a movement of the hand, there's a movement of the foot. And I'm thinking of the major joints will be hip and shoulder, basically tying together. And then we'll be like creating a connection between the elbow and the knee. So if you think about basically the knee and the elbow hinging out and in, and then if you think about the mobility in the foot and the hand, chain together. It's actually one of those strange patterns you can't really do opposing movements with the foot and the hand that way. Quite tricky kind of work with, but in terms of patterns, just think about chaining the movement. So whatever mobilizations happen in the foot and the hand, just play with a kind of relationship between the two. And again, they don't need to be going the same way. They can be opposing in terms of direction. But just feel that there is a movement there anyway. And they're always like whole body movements really interesting because you're always using the whole body. You can't do otherwise. It's just whether I'm blocking parts of it or restricting parts of it or locking parts of it. Yeah, sometimes that's useful and sometimes it's not. There we go. Right. And then with that, just focus on basically hip and shoulder. Hip and shoulder in this case. So play with the kind of winding pattern. I'm going to go a little bit more to fist. Obviously the foot, you don't want to curl the foot up, so you don't want to have the same kind of curl in the foot and make it tight. So in terms of the handwork going into this pattern, think of actually the opposite in terms of the foot would be like the foot really releasing to the ground. So this kind of pattern. And at the same time, I'm just going to play with rolling through and basically a winding pattern through the body. And try and feel that again, the shoulder and the hip basically create the motion as well. So you could do this by like locking the hips out and rolling. The arms would be useful, again, in terms of shoulder mobility, that a useful drill. But in this case, think about the hips basically winding the motion. And if you can get to the point where the hips and the connection to the feet and legs are kind of creating the motion and the shoulders receiving it, you might get a little bit more of a kind of elastic quality through the spine. Then the major part of the body that's working is basically the spine. Think about channeling the movement up and down the spine. So we'll just start to take it with that winding, again, a little bit more into wave patterns. And just feel, again, what kind of pattern comes out. The body in terms of movement quality might be a bit sharper, might be a bit more like a whip. It might be like a kind of elastic quality through it. Just follow it for a little bit. Depending on the way the body feels, just follow a pattern a little bit with it. And then again, just start to play with the feet. But again, don't make them the priority of the exercise. So we tend to, when we go to footwork and handwork, they tend to become the kind of priority. So they take over the movement. Feel that you're basically like spreading the body out. And I would play with maybe a little bit more like sliding patterns for the body. So maybe it's just the feeling of like the hip sliding the foot through. And then I'm going to start to work a little bit more in kind of hand-me patterns. So I think about working basically triangulating the feet. And then I'm also going to start to play with triangulating the shoulders. So think about two things. Just in terms of pure solo work would be like triangulated patterns of the feet. Something I would do with a partner is like have the partner in the space, and then I'm just working on kind of presenting a side of the body. So obviously the whole purpose of Hanmi, or one of the main purposes of Hanmi, is to basically present the side of the body. Really something that comes from weapon work, obviously, but in this case, just start to play with the ability the body to kind of wedge itself and present a side. And so the two main parts of the triangle in this case will be like the back side of the body, the kind of wide base of the triangle, and then the pointy end, tip end of the triangle. So the one thing then start to work with would be like maybe deepening the triangle, and it would mean like going into a little bit more maybe squat patterns and things like this as you're doing the winding. And it's really a benefit. A lot of the time in Aikido we're doing more kind of natural gait work with the feet, and there's really a benefit of like long stances, not maybe for when you're doing technical work in terms of training, but in terms of again training the body for different patterns, and to train a kind of again like resilient body in terms of a lot of the stuff we do. And there's times in the obviously in the patterns we do like the 𝗧𝗔𝗞𝗘𝗠𝗨𝗦 and partner work, especially taijutsu work, when the body's really there's a high demand on the body, and it's useful when you train it in a way where the body's comfortable and to the ground, things like that. Great, perfect. And then next one, just play with, again, this is where the body goes a little bit more into kind of matched pattern. And I'm just going to start to play with the hand opening. So in the same way that the foot's kind of spreading to the ground and sealing, think about that the hand kind of sealing down this way. Obviously, a lot of the work we're doing is a bit more in this kind of area of the hand. So it would be like the blade edge of the hand, this kind of way. There's really nothing wrong with pushing in this kind of work. It wouldn't be really kind of working koku work in this sense, but push works is again very useful as well. So as you're doing it now, just start to play with again the shape of the hand, and particularly playing with a kind of open and closing now. So particular this feeling of kind of spreading the hand out, and it could be again the contact point that you're kind of pressing through could be the blade edge of the hand, or it could be the palm, the heel. Could also be the fingers. There's many times if you think about things like 𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓 where we're passing the movement through the kind of through the fingertips. You know, to this kind of patterns. The main thing again is that the mobility is coming from the core of the body and kind of reaching out. So it's irrelevant really what part of the body is being presented forward, as long as I'm working with the body in balance and it's passing a spiral pattern through. It will have a kind of relationship to the movements we do in Aikido. And if it doesn't, maybe it's just a pattern that we don't use, or maybe it's just my ability to find the pattern in it. Great. And then lastly, just start to play with the head a little bit. So again, there's a lot of times where the body's kind of twisting and spiraling through. Not twisting, sorry, it shouldn't be twisting, but spiraling through. And think about the head basically finding a pattern. So you could also do this. This comes up particularly later in terms of taking a kemi, where I've got to focus on the body being kind of distorted through, and then I need to kind of match the movement of the body, or the body's being really kind of split and separated. And I'm going to be kind of working the head a little bit more. So the way I would work this is basically have a point of focus and basically mobilize the body around. And you're probably working a little bit more in the peripheral vision rather than it would be like if somebody's doing ikkyo at me, and I'm not going to kind of stare at them all the time if they're doing the pattern, but I'm going to have the sense that the person's still in view. And probably again, it's probably more peripheral. But in terms of solo work, just think about the kind of effect of the head position on the rest of the body, and particularly for again training resilience, and especially for kemi work, then I'm going to be working in the area where the spine's actually being torsioned. And then the more the body's used to these patterns, the less kind of I'll go into this kind of freeze or shock patterns or fear patterns. And again, I just feel a little bit more safe with the body being taken out of structure. And then again, just play with a little bit more, doing where the body's kind of free. So it's that kind of paradoxical thing that the more the body's kind of knitting together and connecting, the more you're comfortable with being kind of split and separated. And a lot of the techniques, obviously, that we do are splitting, separating the body. So that's what's happening with the body. And again, the more I'm comfortable with the body actually knitted together, then maybe I can just take a little bit further into the technique, and then maybe I'm a bit more useful for my partner to train with. Get a bit more out of the training later. Right, and then last one, just play a little bit with the wrist, just the last couple of minutes before we do weapons. I'm not doing any specific ones, but just you've got like this pattern, obviously, this pattern. You can also work the fingers a little bit more. So just what I would do is just basically take a pattern and think about the same work going on. So what we, again, to isolate the wrist is a good thing. We'll be like, I just do this and I make the body static and I kind of pull through the wrist, and you're basically just training through the forearm and the wrist and resilience here. Think about going a little bit more into mobile items because it's where the patterns are useful, are more useful. And again, you can think about a basic one like Nikya, a kind of pattern like this. And then I'm thinking about chaining it through the body. Again, the more the body's resilient, the more the body's receiving this pressure through the body, the more I'm able to kind of mobilize the core of the body and protect the rest of the body. If you think about what someone's actually doing, they're not really attacking the wrist. They're using the wrist to get through to the core of the structure, or to break the structure. So again, the more I'm actually creating that connection consciously through myself, then the more I can kind of use it to keep the body free and safe. So just play with, again, taking a grip on the hand, and you've obviously got movements that the wrist likes to do, which is like on that pattern, a little bit of that pattern, a little bit in rotation, and then you've got taking that further. Most of the Aikido techniques are actually working in the joints where they're healthy. They're just probably putting a little bit more pressure on them, but where the wrist is actually being kind of bent back, or the fingers are being bent back, we don't do those, or we don't tend to rely on them. Aikido you can do. Obviously, some of the application work is going to go into that area, but a lot of the work is actually just taking the healthy mobility of the joint and maybe just adding a little bit more weight and pressure to it. And the more resilient they are to that, safer the body is in the training. So. And then last one, having said that, just go into this one, which will be like taking the wrist as far as it can go back and also taking it into the fingers. The danger with this one, again, if it's done very strong and hard and fast and the body's not ready for it, is that the elbow locks up, and then also the tendons in the arms are like as stretched out as they can get. And if the movement's sharp in the body and I don't respond to it, then that's where you get a lot of injuries in this, and particularly the elbow, because it's not super sensitive. I need to be very sensitive to the point where the elbow is actually locked up. Feedback on that would be also in the shoulder. So like the movement of the shoulder kind of rising through the pattern, and the shoulder's basically trying to mobilize the body around it. And then I would really listen to that and then get the body moving in motion. So there's a few techniques we do where the elbows are locked up. And again, what I don't want to do is wait to the point where the elbow's fully, truly locked up and then hold the pattern or hold the body in place. So again, it's small things, but it's like noticing, being very sensitive to the feeling of the elbow being locked up. It's got to its maximum range. And if I had a little bit more of a kick to the motion, the elbow's in danger. And it's not just the elbow, but again, it's the tendons in the hands, and it tends to be where, again, you get a few injuries in terms of training. Tend to go with the elbow is locked out, and then that kind of shoulder suffers and the wrist suffers and the tendons around it and the small muscles around it. So again, just be a bit sensitive to that. And then with that, just feel that, again, you can maximally lock this part of the body. I think if I'm just looking at the shoulder, just feel the shoulder's actually still free. Now, if the shoulder's still free, then I'm free and able to move the body while this is still locked up. So the more I can kind of free the shoulder up and mobilize around it and channel that movement more down into the body, then again, the more space there is in the body to kind of receive the techniques. So even when it is being actively locked up, I'm still able to kind of mobilize the rest of the structure. So again, just the last one, do with the wrist. And there's a really great pattern we do, which goes into the 𝗔𝗞𝗞𝗘𝗠𝗨𝗦. It's one of the variations of the grip. When we do this kind of grip here, we'll be like taking the arms up and back, and then the pattern will be like just releasing the shoulder. So we'll finish with that one. Again, it's just going into the hip and the shoulder. Think about taking the arms up and back like someone's actively pulling them up. Find the kind of maximum range of the body, and then what I do is just play with softening the shoulder. So again, it's where kind of the mobility work becomes very useful. And it's again, you can have limited mobility but still be able to find space in the joint, and it's just whether I can kind of position the body in a way where the joint's still free. Just less on that. And then just to release everything out, just take it into a swing through. So there's a little bit of sword work. So yeah, it's releasing that a little bit there. Right, very nice. Lovely. Okay. Just play with one thing, just in this exercise, and again, it's useful for sword work. You could fix a point of contact, like there, and then kind of move around it and let the body go. But notice in this pattern, the tendency is to go into kind of positions like this, where the body actually gets distorted. And I'm trying to basically hold the pattern. It's not wrong, obviously, and there's useful parts of that, but play with, in this case, I'm going to like slightly shut the eyes off, and I'm just going to let them follow the pattern. So you could do this also with the eyes closed, but the best way would be like eyes open. And I'm just going to allow the eyes to track that pattern. So if you think of this as kind of an arcing pattern this way, I'm going to just let the eyes naturally follow the pattern, and they're not doing it. They're just basically following. They're just basically following the movement. But it's an area which is a very interesting area. It's where the eyes kind of slightly switch off in terms of the focus for the body. So, and it tends to be where we're kind of located, especially in terms of patterns for the body, and especially in terms of especially now where we've got like lots of screens, lots of things, and again, it's important. But what I would do is just, again, the feeling would be like just slightly switch off the eyes and let them just follow the pattern in this case. So, and then the head can basically sit comfortably in the movement. So, right. Good. Super. And then when you're ready, just grab a bokken. We'll do some 𝗧𝗔𝗞𝗘𝗠𝗨𝗦𝗨. There we go. Yep. So we'll just go straight into the first route. So just take your time with it. Finally, come out, drop the spine. Take your time a little bit in this top position, and then just settling into the ground with it. So work your way into it. And take your time in those two positions. Okay, good. Now, this is also where the eyes really matter. So just watch one pattern which tends to be, there's a few that tend to come up. One which would be where it counters the movement would be that as I raise, I start to look down. In terms of, again, like lengthening through the spine, just check this one. So it would be like, as I go into it, I watch the feet. And then straight over, what happens is that the spine starts to kind of go into this kind of collapsed position. So in this one, if I think about the view in this one, I'm going to basically establish as far as I can out onto the horizon. And I'm basically going to kind of track to it with the body. Just in terms of, but not so much about the eyes and the view, but really in terms of the spine, because the more I'm kind of settled to the horizon, the more the body can kind of be neutral in this pattern. And then from here, just I would keep the view on that and allow the body to kind of roll around it this way. But yeah, the main one would be something like the eyes look down, or the other one would be that I'm looking at the sword or the hands. None of them I wouldn't say any of them are wrong. It's just whether the timing of them is appropriate, because sometimes obviously you are looking down, sometimes you are with the eyes like towards the sword, and the sword's actually passing through your view, obviously. So there is a point where you do check the sword through, but again, it's why it's very useful to train outdoors. But regardless of where you are, just think about the eyes kind of reaching to the horizon line. So there's always the horizon line. It's just whether you've got something in front of it. Obviously, in this case, I've got houses in front of it and bushes and shrubs. So I just kind of have a feeling of, again, it's whether this kind of usefulness of the eyes basically kind of switching off a little bit, but using them away where they're just going to kind of reach out and then kind of letting them kind of rest and settle. So again, because it's 𝗧𝗔𝗞𝗘𝗠𝗨𝗦𝗨, you don't tend to have a very sharp focus in the eyes. But then the main thing will be listening to the, or yeah, using the feedback of the eyes, like where I look and how the eyes move. Basically, again, will really change the position of the head. And again, it's whether the position of the head's appropriate or not to the movement. Yeah, very good. All right. And we'll just take that a few parts down, go into the kind of neck area. So the main one with this will be if I go, as I go into the cut, watch for something like this happen, where the head basically goes into a kind of push-pull out. So it tends to be very subtle, or it tends to be big, but just notice it again, it's the feedback as I go into the cut here, whether the neck's able to kind of stabilize. I always go, in terms of correction, I always go to the feeling of length through the body. So it would be noticing things like compression in the structure here, or as I'm going into the grip, maybe it's compression here up into the shoulder, and it will cause basically a reflex back into the neck. So if I think about this area of the body, like here, this whole area, I think about it being long, and basically you could think about it two ways. You could think about it being long and like tightened a little bit, but the best way would it just to be long and kind of lengthened out. So again, the pattern actually helps this in terms of assisting that pattern. As you go to this part of the pattern, I think about this whole area being kind of switched off and soft, and then as I engage into it, again, it's kind of switched off and soft, but it's the sense that it's kind of long and rolled. Get the shoulders are involved in it. And again, it's never a case where you can just kind of fix one part of the body. Again, I need to kind of look at how the rest of the body's interacting. But particularly things like as you go into the grip of the sword, then noticing, again, the feedback is in the exercise of this one. It'd be so if I go into it and there's a kind of sharp response back in the head, or there's a kind of wobble in the head. Again, it's just noticing it. And it would just, in terms of balance and stability, the body, it's just feedback on the exercise. And if I'm looking at the body to be calm, then it's not that things don't move, it's just the fact that it's secure in place and it feels comfortable. And again, it will be, or I would look at correcting that again, is just in terms of length. And it might just be going again slower in the exercise, going softer with the grip, softer with the idea of power. And just noticing basically tension in the body. So actually a good correction for this would be do the cut as slowly as you can. So particularly on the descent. There's some schools of kendo kenjutsu that I know they do a very slow cut. So they'll take like they go to the extreme because it's Japan. So they'll go like a minute through or 2 minutes through the cut, the whole motion through. If you do this, you really notice excess tension in the body. So I wouldn't advise to do this with a heavy bokken, but again, just feel that you can kind of take the movement as slowly as possible. It's tricky again to go slow because there's a kind of natural pattern for the sword to drop through, and again it might cause its own problems in terms of the body starts going to kind of restricted patterns. But just in terms of a few times, play with maybe just a slightly slower, and the feeling would be it's not to do the exercise slowly, it's to notice the feedback as I do it, where the tension maybe starts to creep in the motion. And I'm noticing that as you do it slowly, it might just give you a bit more idea of what's happening in the body as you do that cut, and then maybe as I'm going into the pattern normally, I can just feel where the body needs to be a little bit more maybe switched on or a little bit more relaxed. I always think about, again, there's parts of the body that can be a bit less switched on, and there's parts of the body that need to be a bit more switched on. And it's usually in the kind of weak chains of the body, so the neck, the wrists, ankles. And that's why a lot of the training, if it's done well, will kind of strengthen those areas naturally as well. So yeah, very nice. Great. Perfect. Very nice. Great. And then we're just going to a little bit Zengo, so that same kind of pattern with it. Obviously, you've got the rotation through the spine now, so just allow it to kind of release through and then go into the cut down. So particularly, again, noticing that if you go to the neck, kind of head area first. And again, obviously in terms of eyes, so really allowing the eyes to switch, change, and again, find a new point of focus, switch, change, find a new point of focus, switch, change, find a new point of focus. And again, just notice that the tendency, again, I go into a pattern that I'm used to, very familiar with. I might start to draw back into, again, patterns like watching the hands, watching the sword. And again, not that any of them are wrong, but it's just whether they're appropriate. Again, particularly looking at the ground now would be like a major one, which would just throw the body out of the pattern. So and if you think of this as like you've got like a spiral rotation, then I want all the joint systems to go into like spiral rotation, and the eyes are included in that. So the eyes are going to kind of go into kind of naturally a spiraling pattern through. There we go. Great. Lovely. Great. 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 And then we're just going to number 5. So just work straight in with a step with it. So again, find a kind of point out with the view, and then just allow the body to kind of track to it and cut towards it through. So again, noticing things like where the eyes go, do a couple of cuts each side. You got space before you back. Yeah, just like sort of fix the eyes a little bit lower and trying to move around it. All right. All right. Just play with one exercise. It's always the kind of problem I find with sword, which is again it's in the restrictive patterning of the arms forward, and it's one of the best things about it as well. So notice this, and when you do this, the tendency is to do something like release the shoulders and then go into the pattern, or the shoulders basically get, or the arms get kind of pulled out, and then I'm doing something like this. And again, all this stuff is basically splitting the body away. So just play with one. It's just we'll do it as a kind of cool down as well. But what I'm going to do is really create a strong connection for the pommel end of the sword and create it to the core of the body, and then just play with this. And the first thing I'm going to just start to play with is basically the hips. It goes like a kind of golfer swing in a sense, but just play with the ability of the hips to mobilize, and then start to pass that motion up into the shoulders. And don't worry about the sword at all. So I'm not trying to mobilize the sword. This is where I've got this. I just put it in the Lancaster dojo, but there's a very heavy club, bokken, and I would use this for this, like rested into the ground, and then I would just play with mobilizing the body around it. So, but you can do this with the sword, so it's very useful to do with the bokken because it also plays with the release through the arms. But just play with now, getting a kind of swinging pattern. And again, the main joint system here is going to be the hips, and then up into the shoulders. So then just start to play with the movement through the shoulder. And the key thing to notice with this, the feedback in this is what happens with the bokken, obviously, but there's a very clear difference, like 1 and 0 is between moving the sword around with the arms and basically releasing the shoulder through. So the effect of the mobility through the body goes through the sword rather than the sword basically dragging the body around. So it's just one of the kind of points I need to make a clear distinction with. And Peter Ralston has a really great exercise that he calls walking a sword. So picking the sword up and basically walking the sword around, going for a walk. And there's a famous artist, Paul Klee. He described drawing as taking a line for a walk. And this is got actually a very similar thing. If you think about kind of tracing patterns with the tip of the sword, it was like a paintbrush. And I would just play with basically the ability of the body to trace a line through with the tip of the sword. And again, it's the only distinction will be whether I'm doing it from the periphery and trying to do it with the arms, or trying to lead it from the core of the body. And then obviously the way I'm relating to the ground down through the legs, and then the way you're relating out through the tip of the sword through the arms. And the main, again, it's always like distinctions are very powerful in terms of experience, but the main thing would be actually drop them all and go to the feeling that the whole body's again working together. So things like where the shoulder or where the arm ends or begins, they're really kind of, again, things that change the relationship to the body in terms of movement. And again, things like my experience of the ground or my feeling of contact through to the bokken and beyond is, again, it's where you're going to eventually going to go. Hey, John.
I think there's a quote from Miro. The critic said, "Oh, you've just drawn a line." Said, "Yes, but it took me 50 years to learn to draw that."
Yes, correct. Damn critics. And then last one, just play with again. Just go to again, like fully mobilizing it. And if you think about that, like tracing a line through the parts of the movement, it tends to get kind of be dead a little bit. It would be like the back part of the movement. So again, it's in general things is like as it goes out of view, I start to kind of drop it from my attention. So really feel that your connection to the tip of the weapon really strong, and it's going to that kind of backside of the body. And again, just in terms of creating more sensation in the backside of the body or the sword or things that I'm connecting into, again, just useful in terms of connection work. And then lastly, just play with a very soft kind of finish with it, and then just start to allow yourself to kind of cut for really last minute or so, but then keeping a very strong, deep connection to the movement of the tip of the sword. And again, the more kind of feeling I have at the tip of the sword, the more I'm able to mobilize it, the more I'm able to balance the body, all these kind of things. And it just comes down again, it's just whether the arms are doing it or I'm kind of moving the periphery of the body with the feeling, or whether the whole body is generating motion. A little bit big for the next 20 seconds or so. And we'll just bring it back down a little bit. Nice. Yeah, good. Perfect. And then last 20 seconds or so, just play with, again, going a little bit smaller with it. And again, just kind of tracing a line. The one you see, that would be with like this kind of, in a way, it's a kind of handshake with the body. So I think about taking the sword, tend to do it when I pick the sword up as another bokken that I'm not familiar with, kind of going something like this. And it would just be the body kind of grounding in, and I'm just kind of feel the weight of the sword and the balance of it. But again, it's not going to come from something like this. It would just come from a kind of shape with the body. And then goes back to the original exercise, will be like just creating a kind of subtle bounce down and just feeling the effect out. So again, the feedback's in the sword for the body. If the sword's kind of drifting forward and out, then the body's also drifting out. I feel the sword's very heavy weighted. Just a little bit out to balance there. So just go back into the feedback into the body. And then lastly, just play with the sword kind of free moving, and then just go back into a balance again. So also just release through the shoulders. If you feel one side of the body's a bit more stiff, maybe you could use the weight of the bokken, or you could free it out a little bit. And just also just checking the body, just checking things like the ankles, wrists, shoulders, neck. Great. Oh, we're going to start right there. Right. Domo, arigatou gozaimasu.
Arigatou gozaimasu.
Oh, very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We go.